Alright, so chapter 11, we're going to be looking at the political system. And our political system does a lot, or has a lot to do with public opinion. Well, public opinion is the total of the opinion held concerning a particular issue. And so when we look at public opinion, typically we like to say, majority of Americans believe this. Doesn't mean that everybody believes it. No, it just means that there's a significant number that believe in a certain way on a particular issue. So the issues could be anything from education to freedom of speech to immigration, all kinds of stuff. So again, not everybody believes it, but what is the majority public opinion kind of thing? Now there's different things that shape your public opinion, and that could be family and friends. It could be mass media, and mass media are those things that gets information to a large number of people. So that could be like newspapers and TV and radio and the World Wide Web, films, books, magazines, all kinds of stuff. Anything that reaches a large number of people. Now there's some cautions about this. The first is that you have to be aware that sometimes this information, no matter where it comes from, may not always be reliable. It may not always be accurate. It could have a bias, which means that it leans one way or the other. And so it's very important for you to examine what you see and what you hear and what you read. Be able to recognize the difference between fact and opinion. What is one person's opinion is not always factual. And also to recognize what are reliable sources of who can you go to for accurate information, or what kinds of mass media can you go to for accurate information. And so what is kind of the difficulty for a lot of people is knowing the difference between propaganda and how that influences your public opinion. Now, propaganda are ideas that are used to influence people, to get you to think one way or another. And sometimes that's negative, but sometimes it's neutral, and sometimes it's positive. You really have to work hard at recognizing what they're trying to get through to you. But propaganda has had an increasing amount of influence on people, and the reason for that are two reasons. The first is that there is a growth of mass media, that we just have more things today that can get to more people. You've got like Facebook, and you've got Twitter, and you've got all kinds of stuff like TV is available pretty much everywhere. Radio stations are available everywhere. So just the growth of mass media itself. The second is the growth of technology. Like I mentioned, we now have Facebook pages devoted to particular beliefs. You have Twitter feeds that go to particular issues and particular ideas and are proponents of certain beliefs. So like I said, the growth of mass media and the growth of technology themselves have led to an increase in the influence that propaganda has. Now, there's various different types of propaganda, and we're going to look at the two main ones. There's concealed and revealed. Concealed propaganda is used to deliberately fool people, and it's used to fool you without letting you know that it's trying to influence you. And so typically concealed propaganda is presented as factual, and their sources are kept secret, but typically these concealed types of propaganda can be very harmful. Good examples would be stories that are made up about actors, retouched photographs, rumors. Those would be things that would be concealed propaganda. They're trying to influence you without actually letting you know that you're being influenced. The second type are revealed propaganda, and revealed propaganda makes the audience aware that they're trying to influence you, and it's the most common form of propaganda, and it directly appeals to the public because you know that that's what they're trying to do. You're aware of it. The best example is just advertising. Any ads that you see, it could be commercials on TV, it could be radio ads, it could be the ads that pop up on YouTube. All kinds of stuff. So that advertising is making you aware that, yeah, I'm trying to get you to buy this, or I'm trying to get you to believe in this particular thing. So there are different techniques that are used with propaganda, and we're not going to get into all of them, but we're going to hit on the main 6 of them, or the 6 that are most used in political ads. And the first are testimonials, and testimonials usually take famous people and get their endorsement. So because the idea is that you trust the judgment of people who are admired, the people that you admire. So you're trying to get them to believe the same way that these people believe. So the problem is that testimonials don't prove a whole lot. These people are not experts in any particular field. Typically, they're there for their star power, as opposed to any real knowledge that they bring, or really any real expertise that they bring. So it can be kind of misleading. Great example would be like Michael Jordan and his endorsement of Hanes. Well, just because he says that he wears it doesn't mean that he wears it all the time. Maybe not. You don't know. I mean, he's getting paid to say that he's using the Hanes underwear and the Hanes t-shirts and that kind of thing. So, sometimes it's hard to prove that they truly believe in the product. The second type are bandwagon. And bandwagon basically goes with this idea that it's peer pressure. Everybody's doing it. And so it appeals to the human nature to do what everybody else is doing and to fit in and to not be an outcast. And so, it's like that bandwagon effect that everybody jumps on board the bandwagon because that's what everybody else is doing, and so it's popular to do it. The third is name calling, and name calling is attaching like an unpleasant label or unpleasant description to something. A lot of times they don't have a whole lot of proof for it, or it's not supported by facts, but they attach this mentality that, oh, this is weak or this is not good enough, that they have failed you in some respect, sort of thing. The next technique is the glittering generalities, and glittering generalities sound good, but they really don't have much meaning. It doesn't tell you a whole lot about the product or the person. It just says, oh, it's very vague statements to try and get positive images, like they're supportive of the middle class, but it doesn't give you like specifics of how they're supportive of the middle class. Or things like when you're talking about commercials, when commercials use like new and improved formula, that kind of thing. Well, first off, it's kind of an oxymoron, because how can it be new and improved? Kind of thing. But also, being new and improved doesn't tell you anything about the product. It doesn't tell you about the ingredients. It doesn't tell you what it does. It just says it's new and improved. And because it's new and improved, you should want it. So that's the glittering generalities. They want you to think positively about it without actually getting any details about the product. The next one is the plain folks appeal, and plain folks appeal basically is trying to get to your average everyday person, that they understand the problems of the average American, and so you kind of get this homey, down to earth feel kind of thing. And so this is like when you see political ads that are really on this plain folks appeal. You got the candidate walking around in jeans and tennis shoes and like a button-up shirt with no tie, that kind of thing, because they want you to think, oh, this is just an average person. I could see this person walking on the street any day, as opposed to somebody who's in like a three-piece suit and looks very business formal kind of thing. The next one is card stacking. And card stacking is they are going to highlight the good stuff and downplay the other side. And so they're going to use all the facts that favor one side over another. So they're like stacking the cards against the other side, saying that this is what this person has that the other candidate does not. So that's what card stacking is. So they use all of these techniques in propaganda, in these commercials for the political parties and political candidates. And when they want to find out, okay, how much influence are they having over things, they start measuring public opinion. What do Americans think about this candidate or about this issue? And the most obvious way to gather results is to look at elections. Well, they must have liked this part about this candidate because they voted for him, kind of thing. Not always the most accurate, not always the most reliable way to measure. And so another way to measure is through polls. Polls are surveys. And so typically when you give a survey, you want to choose a sample. You're not going to survey everybody. You're going to choose a representative sample. And the challenge with a poll or with a survey is to phrase a neutral question, because you don't want to lead people to answers, because then it'll seem like you're trying to get a certain answer, and that's going to skew the results, and it's not going to be very accurate. So how questions are asked are going to determine a lot of times how people are going to answer. For example, what if you ask, should we have more firefighters hired in Plymouth County? Well, most people are going to say, yeah, because, I want to be protected from my house being on fire, and I want to have enough people to respond if there's a fire to prevent any tragedy and that kind of thing. But in order to pay for hiring more firefighters or employing and training more firefighters, you're going to have to raise taxes. So if you phrase the question as, should taxes be raised in order to hire and train and equip more firefighters, you're probably going to get an answer of no, because people don't want to pay more taxes. Even if it's for a good cause, like having more firefighters, they're still not going to want to pay higher taxes. So, like I said, it's the same principle. You're still looking at hiring and equipping and training new firefighters, but you're going to get two very different answers depending on how you ask the question. So that's one of the huge issues with polls and surveys, is framing a neutral question that's not going to lead people to an answer. The next part of looking at public opinion is, well, we could look at interest groups. Interest groups are organizations of people with a common interest who are trying to influence government. They're trying to influence government policies, trying to influence government decisions and laws that are passed, all kinds of stuff. A lot of times they're known as lobby groups or lobbyists. Good examples of interest groups would be like groups like the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And what they are doing is they are working for minority rights. Another group would be like the American Farm Bureau Federation, which obviously they're working for farmers and issues that address farmers. Environmentalists there's tons of different interest groups for environmentalists, but they're working towards improving the environment and how we treat it. So what do these groups do? Well, they write to the president, or they write to the senators or representatives of their state about specific bills that are going through Congress. They can make speeches. They do demonstrations to try and get attention and public support for or against a bill. And they try to influence public opinion as well. They're trying to, they welcome people coming to them as a source of information. So they usually have pamphlets or websites where people can go to find out more information about the group and about what they support and don't support. Now, there's a lot of critics of interest groups, because the critics say that these interest groups have too much influence or too great of a role in American politics, that these specialty or specialized groups shouldn't have as much influence as they do. And they also, other critics say, well, it's great to have them, but the problem is that there's too much attention that is being paid to those that have the most money and that have the best organization. So maybe there's some really good interest groups or lobbyists out there, but they just don't have the organization and money to get the attention. And so we tend to listen to those that have the money. And they said, well, that's not right either, because that's not really the purpose of an interest group. Anyway, so once you get old enough, you can take part in government. Actually, you could take part in government now. We'll talk about that just a couple seconds here. But when you turn 18, voting is the way that you can have the most influence in government. And by voting, you're putting your right to democracy, or our principle of democracy, into action. Voting gets everybody involved in the political process. You get your chance to have your say. But unfortunately, the U.S. has the lowest voter turnout in the free world. Out of all the democracies, the U.S. has the lowest voter turnout rate, which is so sad, because if you think about countries who recently have had to fight for democracy, who have had to fight for the right to vote, they have better than 90% turnout rate, because they are so thankful for that right. Yet here in the U.S., we kind of take it for granted, and we don't think of it as an important act, but it is. And it's something that our forefathers fought and died for, and yet a lot of our population just kind of says, not that big of a deal. So it is kind of a sad situation. Well, why do so few people vote? A lot of people don't vote because they just don't take the time to register, which really, registering to vote takes very little time today. They revamped the the system, and now you can vote or you can register to vote when you get your 18-year-old driver's license, because they'll ask you, would you like to register to vote at this time? And all you have to do is say yes, and then they'll ask you, do you want to register for a particular political party, like the Democrats or the Republicans? And you can say yes or no, it doesn't matter, but then you're done. That's all it takes. It's very little effort on your part. Others don't vote because they don't like the candidates. Well, if you don't like the candidates, don't vote for the major parties, vote for somebody else, at least to have your voice be heard. Others don't meet the residency requirement, which that's understandable. If you move to a new state, yeah, there's residency requirements, but most people are just too lazy. They just don't think it matters. They don't think that their vote counts. They don't think it's going to make a difference, when in reality, when you look at our numbers, in our last few presidential elections, we've had less than 60% of the people making the decisions for our country. So if more people would get off their butts and go vote, we could have very different outcomes to the election. And a lot of young kids say, well, nobody listens to me. The candidates aren't talking about our issues. Well, they're not talking about your issues because young people don't come out in large numbers to vote. If young people became a larger percentage of the voters, candidates are going to take more attention and take more time to look at your needs. So I have a problem with that. Obviously, it's kind of a major issue for me that young people don't see the need to go out to vote, but then they gripe and complain about decisions that are being made for elderly people, because that's who does go out to vote. So anyway, moral of the story, go out and vote when you get a chance. Like I said, even though you're not 18 now, you can still take part in your government. You can still take part in the political campaigns. Yeah, you have to be 18 to vote, but any age can volunteer to help out with political parties. There's kids that are as young as 9 and 10 working with political parties, and a lot of it's because their parents are heavily involved in it, but it doesn't take a whole lot for you to volunteer your time. And volunteers are people who work without pay, so yeah, you're not going to get paid to do it, but the experience of it and being able to help and to be involved in the political process is going to be very enlightening to you about what are the issues and who is being involved and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't take much to volunteer for a political campaign. You can volunteer to stuff envelopes to send out to houses. You can volunteer to make phone calls. You can be used in the primary or the caucus process. You can be used all over the place. And most political parties are very, very encouraging of young people because they know that that's the future, that these people are going to be future voters. The young people that come to help are going to be future voters, and they're going to be the ones that help to influence the public. And so they're very open to having younger people come in. So that is our political system in a nutshell.